All right, so this is your introduction video to Sherman Alexie, the author of our book, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. Sherman Alexie is a fairly well-known Native American author, very current, still alive, still writing, still very much a producer of books, short stories, novels, poetry, essays. Even has written and been on the production end of a film. He has a very sort of contemporary take on Native American culture, and he is part of sort of the generation that comes after that generation that's sometimes known as the Native American Renaissance that begins back in the time of N. Scott Momaday and other early Native American writers like that. He's a little younger. He was born in 1966. He was born on a Spokane Indian reservation in Welpinit, Washington, and he lives and writes in Seattle today. Many of his writings, he's written many novels and short stories, I say, draw on his own experiences, and they're meant to do that in a way that sort of modernizes or brings Native American experience up to a more contemporary sort of setting. He has ancestry of several different tribes, but as I said, he grew up on the Spokane Indian Reservation in Washington and lives in Seattle today that has kind of a mixture of different tribes in the area as well. He was born to a father who was a Coeur d'Alene Indian, and his mother was Colville, Flathead, and Spokane. When he was born, and he'll write about this in some of his stories in kind of a fictional way, also in sort of a nod to his own autobiography. When he was born, he had excessive fluid on the brain, and at 6 months old, he had a surgery, but the surgery was very dangerous. Potentially, there were long-term mental disabilities that were projected, but ultimately, the surgery was a success, and he would have to go back and continue to monitor this throughout his time as a young child and young adult. His father was an alcoholic, which is a theme you'll see in a lot of his writing that touches on a sort of autobiographical tinge. His mother sewed and worked at the trading post to support her 6 children. He went to the reservation school, and here he was teased for, among other things, his larger head because of the excessive fluid that he had on his brain. It had enlarged his head as well. And he continued actually to have seizures until he was 7. And his health, the monitoring of his health, kept him out of a lot of activities. So consequently, he read everything. And he was very well read and would experiment with writing and stuff. He left the reservation to go to high school 30 miles away, where he was the only native student. He was a very good student, probably because of all the reading he did and all that time. And he was good at school while he was there, and also good at something else that finds its way into his writing in a lot of ways. And if you follow him on social media like Twitter, he always has comments about this, but he was good at basketball as well. He's a big fan of basketball, in fact. And this finds its way into many of his writings, including our book that we're going to be looking at. Success at high school. He was a good student. His success at high school led to a scholarship at Gonzaga, where he looked into pre-med, then law, and he grew anxious over the pressure and the need to succeed. So he kind of took up drinking a little bit and switched over to Washington State University. Here he began reading and writing a little bit more creatively than he had before, especially poetry. And in 1992 he published a book called The Business of Fancy Dancing, Stories and Poems. And he published this, and he stopped going to school because he wanted to pursue a writing career. Nowadays, he's committed to teaching Native American youth filmmaking and writing skills. Okay, the themes in his writing, you're going to see a lot of these themes. Some of you probably have read Sherman Alexie before. One of his more famous short stories from the collection of The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fistfight in Heaven was actually made into the film Smoke Signals, which there might be a few of you out there that know this. But themes in all of his writing, if you know that film or that story, you're going to recognize the concurrent themes in his other writings. Despair, poverty, violence, alcoholism, absent fathers or lacking fathers. He's also got a tremendously biting sort of wit in his writing. It's different a little bit than Firouzeh Dumas in Funny and Farsi. It's humorous in a way that's commenting on a cynical sort of portraiture of the world as he sees it. And then overarching all of this, one of the major themes is his contemporary portrait of Indians. And he'll use Indians and Native Americans interchangeably. He's very much influenced by pop culture, which sort of makes his writing modern in that sense, modern with a lowercase m. And he blends traditional, sort of traditional values, storytelling, ceremonies, all of those things with very contemporary pop cultural phenomena as well. I've posted for your benefit a video interview on our website that you can listen to, and a couple websites that might be of interest to you as well. His first novel was published in 1996, and it was called Reservation Blues. And those characters that are introduced there are characters that recur in other of his short stories. Thomas and Victor are, of course, if you know the Smoke Signals movie, they're also in this first novel of his called Reservation Blues. In 1993, he did win a PEN Hemingway Award, which is a very prestigious writer's award, for his first big book of fiction, which was that short story collection, The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fistfight in Heaven. In 1996, that first novel of his, Reservation Blues, won an American Book Award. Also in that year, he was on the list of 20 best American novelists under 40. This book, the book that we're going to be looking at, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, won the 2007 National Book Award for Young Adult Literature. And in case you've been living under a rock for the last 10 years or so, young adult literature is a very, very sort of booming market in the last decade or so, where it's reaching out to audiences of all ages, and it's cinematic. The movies are reflecting this, etc. And so this particular book, which Alexie wrote at a sort of adolescent level of audience, really achieved a national sort of acceptance, and certainly not just in YA lit, but across all of literature. He also then would go on to win a 2010 PEN Faulkner Award for his book War Dances. Okay, now this book, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, is, and we'll get into this in the analysis video for next week, but it's a very, very poignant. It involves the diary format, but it sort of goes beyond that into this introspective, ongoing monologue in this character's mind that helps sort of set the stage for an identity sort of Bildungsroman or coming of age expressed for us. Now, mixed into this as well are going to be some drawings, some sort of doodle-esque drawings that help to explain the mind of this young adolescent Indian who who must overcome, well, not overcome, but certainly deal with issues of adolescence, right? Junior high, high school, friends, being poor, this and that, but also the sort of intercultural problems that exist and are exacerbated by being a teenager, right? And these things are wonderfully played out in the voice and in the way that a young 14, 15-year-old boy would talk about them. You're also going to understand part of Alexie's own life being pasted over this fictionalized version. You'll see many of these things that I've just given you in this brief bio expressed in this autobiography in this diary that rings as sort of autobiographical, and you're going to want to sort of latch onto those things. And as I opened with, Alexie writes very much drawing on his own experiences, whether they be stories or whether they be his own life. In the analysis video, we'll get into a little bit more about the sort of topics, the themes that he brings up, and the way that he does this in the diary format, as well as, as we've been talking all along in this course, the ethnicity of recognizing that this is American, but it's also a certain sort of perspective of what it means to be American in the 20th century. So enjoy your reading. Watch out for your critical responses and your quiz coming up, and we'll see you in the next video next week.